Story 1. The Man Who Found Me by the Creek. This happened in the spring of 2020. The world had gone quiet. Too quiet. COVID had locked everything down, and while most people were cooped up in apartments and glued to news feeds, I took a different route. I packed up my gear and headed north. The whole world wanted to stay inside, so I went outside. Back then, I didn't talk to many people. Not because I didn't want to, but because, well, I'd made some mistakes. Something happened with my job in 2019, financial stuff I'm not proud of. Let's just say people lost money, and they blamed me. I lost everything in the fallout. Friends, reputation, even my apartment. I changed my number, quit my job, disappeared. But even then, the texts kept coming. Threats, anonymous numbers, area codes I didn't recognize. Always short messages, always cold. And then, just like that, they stopped. I spent a few months in limbo. No job, no goals, just the road, my truck, and my tent. I started hitting up national parks to clear my head, and that's how I ended up camping along a creek in a remote part of Bitterroot National Forest, Montana. It was a spot I'd found on a hiking blog, a side trail that led to a bend in the creek no one ever visited. No reservations, no rangers, no cell signal. Just flowing water, tall pines, and silence. Exactly what I needed. I got there just after noon, set up camp, built a fire, cooked sausages over the flame, and read a few chapters of a paperback I'd picked up at a gas station. By the time the sun started going down, a soft snow had begun to fall. Not heavy, just enough to coat the ground in a quiet white hush. You could hear every step crunch. I was sitting by the fire with a joint in one hand and my phone in the other, watching the flame dance, when the buzzing started. I nearly dropped the phone. It was a 475 number, Connecticut area code, not one I recognized. First text, "How's the camping going, buddy?" Then, "It's beautiful out here." And then, "I see why you picked this spot." I sat up straight. Suddenly the cold cut through my jacket. I wasn't just high, I was paranoid now. I looked around. The snow was falling more heavily. Trees blurred together. Nothing moved.
No footsteps. No voices.
But someone knew I was here, and they were texting me. Now, I texted back, "Who is this?" No answer. Just the sound of wind moving through pine needles. The crackle of the fire. My heart beating in my ears. For a while, nothing happened. I kept the phone in my hand, the joint forgotten, half burnt between my fingers. The snow picked up, covering my boots, blurring the treeline. I tried to convince myself it was someone I knew. A sick joke. Maybe my brother, maybe one of the old guys from work. But they didn't know I was here. No one did. Not even my parents. Then another buzz. Doesn't matter anymore. I clenched the phone so hard I thought I'd crack the screen. I typed back, "How do you know I'm camping? Who are you?" Still nothing. I grabbed my bag and pulled out my SIG P365. Checked the safety. Loaded. I'm not the kind of guy who flashes weapons around, but being alone in the woods with a psycho texting me about my exact location, I wasn't about to take chances. Normally, I'd put the fire out before turning in. But that night, I left it burning. I didn't want total darkness. I crawled into my tent, zipped the flap, and sat on my sleeping bag with the gun in one hand, phone in the other. Tried to distract myself with YouTube, some stupid true crime video about campers going missing in the woods. Ironic, I know, but just as the narrator said something about a fatal mistake, my phone buzzed again. New message. Same number. No words this time, just a photo. I stared at it, heart hammering. It was a picture of my tent, taken from maybe 10 feet away. In the dark, you could see the glow of my headlamp bleeding through the nylon. You could see me. Then a message followed. "Have a good night's sleep." I froze. Outside, I heard footsteps in the snow. Slow, heavy. Then came a flash, bright and brief, like someone shining a flashlight toward the tent, or taking another picture. And then, silence. That moment snapped something in me. I wasn't stoned anymore. My chest was tight, fists clenched around the pistol. I waited, barely breathing, listening. The footsteps were gone, but I knew they weren't far. Whoever it was had been watching me. Long enough to follow me here. Long enough to wait until dark. Long enough to take a photo from just outside the tent. I don't know what came over me. Fear, adrenaline, something deeper. I unzipped the tent in one violent motion, stepped out into the cold night air, and fired 2 rounds straight into the air. The cracks of the shots split the silence like glass. Then footsteps, running, not toward me but away. I shouted,
I'm armed.
I swear to God, I'll shoot if you come near me again. No answer. Just the sound of someone crashing through brush and snow, retreating into the forest. I stood there, breathing hard, pistol still raised. The fire behind me was low now, glowing orange against the snow. Eventually, I went back inside and zipped the tent shut. I didn't sleep that night, just sat there waiting, listening. No more texts, no more photos, no more footsteps. The sun came slow that morning, bleeding through the trees like a final breath. I packed my stuff before it even fully cleared the ridgeline. Didn't eat, didn't make coffee, just folded the tent, stuffed it into the truck, and left without looking back. I never reported it. What would I even say? Someone followed me into the forest, sent me a picture, then ran? I changed my number again that same week. It's been almost 5 years now. No more messages, no more strange calls, nothing. But sometimes, when I'm in the woods, and it's dead quiet, and I hear a twig snap somewhere I didn't step, I still check my phone, just in case. Because whoever that was out there, they had my number, and they knew where to find me. Story 2. Something screamed outside the tent. This happened when I was 12. Every October, my family would head up north to spend a weekend at my uncle's property in rural Wisconsin, near a little town called 3 Pines. He had 4 acres of land out there, mostly woods, and a big old hunting cabin with enough space for all of us. 5 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and a wraparound porch that creaked with every step. Uncle Rob was the kind of guy who collected knives and camouflage jackets and thought teaching kids to gut a fish was a rite of passage. My dad, though more mellow, loved the outdoors too, so it made sense they'd raise us that way. That year, my brother Luke, our cousins Max and Eli, and I had this brilliant idea over lunch. We were going to camp in the woods, just us boys, no adults, real survival stuff. Our dads, already 2 beers deep, thought it was hilarious and said sure. Our moms, not so much, but no one outright said no. That afternoon, Uncle Rob led us past the edge of his property into the woods. He pointed out trees marked with faded red paint, his property line, and then took us beyond it to a mossy clearing. He called it the deer beds. Said bucks came through here during the rut and it was the softest spot to sleep in the whole forest. The 4 of us set up the tent there, big enough for all of us. Sleeping bags, flashlights, even a deck of Uno cards. We felt invincible, like we were making history. We went back to the house for dinner, hyped for our big night. Our moms brought it up again, but our dads just laughed it off. If something eats them, we'll hear the screams, my dad joked. That night, just before 9, they walked us back into the woods with extra blankets and headlamps. The house lights faded behind us as the trees swallowed us whole. And then we were alone, just 4 boys, a nylon tent, and a whole lot of darkness. We passed time playing Uno by flashlight, arranged in a little circle inside the tent. Max kept cheating. Eli kept accusing him of stacking the deck. Luke just kept losing and groaning about it. It was actually kind of perfect. The woods were quiet, like really quiet. No wind.
No bugs.
Just us and the muffled crackle of leaves far beyond the nylon walls. Then came the first scream. We all froze. It echoed faintly from somewhere deeper in the woods. Long, high-pitched. It sounded like a woman. Eli was the first to whisper, "What was that?" I wanted to be the calm one, so I said the only thing I could think of. Probably a fox. Their screams sound human. That seemed to calm everyone a bit. Even though I wasn't totally sure myself. We played another round. I tried to keep everyone distracted. Then, about 10 minutes later, it screamed again. Louder this time. Closer. That's when we all stopped pretending we weren't scared. I turned off my flashlight, told the others to do the same. Inside the tent, it went completely dark. I could hear Eli breathing fast, Max fidgeting with the zipper on his sleeping bag, and Luke whispering, "We should run." But no one moved, because if we ran, we'd make noise, and noise might get attention. So we just lay there in silence, hoping it was still just an animal, hoping it would stop. But something didn't feel right. The scream wasn't just a sound, it had a kind of emotion behind it. Anger, pain, like it wanted to be heard, like it wanted us to hear it. We whispered about it, tried to make jokes, but the jokes stopped when we heard it. Footsteps,
Fast deliberate.
crunching through the leaves, headed straight for us. They stopped maybe 6 feet from the tent. And then it screamed again. Only this time it wasn't distant. It was right outside. The scream this time was sharp enough to rattle the tent poles. It was so close I swear I could feel the breath of it through the nylon. Then the tent started shaking. Violently, like someone was grabbing it from both sides and pulling. We screamed. All of us. Eli was crying, Luke was shouting, "Stop it!" And Max was curled into a ball. I don't know what came over me, but I unzipped the flap and yelled, "Run!" We spilled out into the woods, flashlights flicking wildly as we bolted through the trees. I didn't look back. Couldn't. Branches whipped my face, roots caught my feet, and every time I stumbled, I thought I'd feel hands grabbing at my ankles. We didn't stop running until we saw the porch light of the cabin. By the time we made it back, our parents were already outside. My mom rushed over. My dad just stared at me, confused and pale. He kept asking, "What happened? What happened?" We told them. The scream, the shaking tent, the footsteps, everything. At first I thought maybe this was all a prank. Maybe one of the adults had crept out to mess with us. Maybe it was my cousin Riley in a mask, or Uncle Rob being a drunk idiot. But then I looked over at the porch and saw all of them, even the girls, still in pajamas, still stunned from the screaming. Uncle Rob went into the woods with a rifle. He and my dad were gone for over 20 minutes. They came back empty-handed, said they found nothing, no tracks, no signs of animals.
No prangir.
The tent was still there, sagging, one side torn. Whatever had come through that night wasn't looking for a laugh. It didn't follow us back, but it could have. We never camped out there again. Even in daylight, that stretch of woods just changed for us. Too quiet, too still. We still visit the cabin some Octobers, but none of us ever sleep alone anymore. And no one talks about the deer beds. Story 3. We woke up wrong. 2 summers ago, my dad and I went camping together in southern Utah, near a place called Elk Ridge. We'd done this sort of thing every few years. No cell service, no work emails, just campfires, trail mix, and quiet. The campsite we picked was part of a scenic loop, technically open to tourists, but far enough out that most people skipped it. There were maybe 4 designated spots along the ridge, each separated by thick woods. The first night was perfect. There were other families at nearby sites, so the woods felt alive. Laughter echoing through trees, kids running around with glow sticks. Felt safe. We made hot dogs, drank a couple beers, even joined another group by their fire for s'mores. My dad told a bad joke, and someone handed him a cigar like it was a reward for effort. We turned in around 11, full and happy. The next day, though, everything changed. The ranger stopped by in the morning, letting us know the entire park had been cleared for the week due to a scheduling error. Apparently, we were the only ones left on the ridge. First, we thought that sounded great. No neighbors, no noise, just the 2 of us and nature. We hiked, fished, took turns reading dumb conspiracy theories out loud while sitting by the river. My dad even joked about how it felt like the start of a horror movie, just before something goes wrong. I laughed, but I didn't find it funny, because later, during the walk back to camp, something shifted. I don't mean something physical. I mean the air, the light, the trees. It was like twilight came early, like the forest turned in on itself. At some point, my dad stopped and said, "Does this feel off to you?" And yeah, it did. The trail didn't look familiar. The wind had completely died. Even our voices sounded muffled, like we were walking through a dream. We didn't speak again until we reached the fire pit. Back at camp, we tried to shake it off, made food, played music on a little Bluetooth speaker, smoked a bit of weed, which usually helped. But it didn't, because just after sundown, as the woods around us turned pitch black, the sounds started. It started with a bang. Not a twig snap, not a branch falling. This was loud, deep, like something massive had fallen in the woods about 50 yards from camp. Dad and I both jumped. He grabbed the flashlight, pointed it toward the tree line, but saw nothing. We waited. The forest swallowed the silence again. Then a second bang. Farther away this time. Same weight. Same density, like whatever it was had just moved. Then a third. Closer again. Too close. We both stood by the fire, unmoving. I had a hatchet. Dad had his pocket knife. "If this is a bear, we're screwed," he muttered. But neither of us said what we were really thinking, because the pattern far, near, then close again felt deliberate, like it was circling. Then the fourth one hit, so loud it felt like the ground shook beneath our boots. Came from maybe 15 yards away, just beyond the trees. I remember Dad looked at me and his face was wrong, blank but wide-eyed, like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. He whispered, "It's standing there." I asked what he meant, but he just kept staring, frozen. I didn't look, couldn't. Instead, I grabbed more firewood and threw it on the flames, hoping light would keep whatever it was away. Then we dove into the tent. He zipped the flap shut behind us and crouched near the entrance, gripping the knife with white knuckles. I lay flat on the floor, trying not to breathe. Then came the vibration, low, subaudible, like a hum that passed through your bones. I could feel it in my chest, my spine, my tongue. I looked at Dad. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Then the noise changed, shifted. It became something alive, a wet, guttural sound, like an animal with no lungs trying to breathe. It was right outside the tent. And then nothing, no movement, no sound, no wind. And the next thing I remember is waking up. I don't remember falling asleep. Neither does my dad. 1 second we were frozen inside that tent, clutching a dull blade and barely breathing. The next we were lying flat on our backs in the cold. The tent flap was still zipped. My sleeping bag was twisted around me like I'd been tossed. Dad was still holding the knife. "What time is it?" I asked. He grabbed his phone. "Dead." I checked mine. Also dead. They'd both been fully charged when we went to the ranger station earlier that evening. We unzipped the flap and stepped out. It was still dark. No birdsong, no wind, just a vast, unnatural stillness like the world had paused. The fire had burned down to cold ash, even though we'd fed it fresh wood right before diving into the tent. Our food? Untouched. Nothing missing. But the entire campsite felt tampered with, subtly off. Chairs angled in the wrong direction. Cooler lid popped but still closed, like someone or something had come through and looked around. We waited in silence until the sky finally began to shift to gray. When the sun came, it felt wrong too. Cold and distant. We packed without a word. Didn't eat. Didn't talk. Just folded everything and threw it into the truck. Only once we were on the road, miles away, did we start speaking again. Dad said, "It felt like it was waiting." I nodded, because I'd felt it too. That whatever was out there, it wasn't just passing by. It was watching, studying, waiting for something to change, for one of us to step too far from the fire, to look too long into the dark. We never went back. I don't even go camping anymore. And sometimes, when I wake up at 3 a.m. for no reason, I still feel that hum in my chest. That vibration that wasn't sound. That wasn't air. Like something buried in my bones, trying to remember me.